Nahum Tate is one of the more colorful and interesting characters of the English Restoration period, a collaborator of John Dryden's, an Anglo-Irish. He was from a noted Irish family, but also a Puritan and a staunch Tory. Lots of weird, conflicting, seemingly challenging issues going on there. But he fit right in with the era, which was very fractious, and he is a notable writer in many respects. He wrote very famously. He was a playwright. He was a poet. He wrote a number of different things. His major works were generally. He rewrote some of Shakespeare's plays. He rewrote a fairly noted revision of Richard II, where he pumped up some of the propagandistic elements of it because he wanted to make sure that it was not criticizing the crown very much or making the royal court seem at all bad. His most famous was probably a revision of King Lear, to which he gave a happy ending. Still get put on from time to time. Riverside Shakespeare Company did it a couple of years ago. Not the greatest example of Shakespearean adaptation, but of some historical note. He wrote a very interesting poem about tea, which has some criticism going on in there, some weird political criticism, but it's probably his best work. He also wrote a sequel, the second part of Absalom and Achitophel, for John Dryden, to which Dryden himself contributed considerably. So Nahum Tate, interesting guy. Some claim to historical significance in the realm of the arts. But one of the more interesting pieces that I find, and one is relatively short, is a poem that he wrote called The Ignorant, which is an intriguing idea and a celebration you not necessarily be terribly expecting. He writes, and this is from 1677. He's still a fairly young man at this point. He writes, "And ignorant I am, and glory in the name. I wot not what of yore rash furiosos did, nor what the dreaming sages said. I cannot run a list of old Rome's triumphs o'er. 'Twas knowledge first to ruin led us on, for with this mortal itch possessed, the happy pair transgressed. Needs must they know, they knew and were undone. And to this hour our misery's sole relief consists in ignorance of our grief. Then plodding mortals cease to boast your dear-bought faculties, for since with knowledge sorrow must increase. Let such as on those terms can science prize, improve in science. But for me, so I may ignorant and happy be, I'll never repine or look with envious eyes on the unhappy learned, and miserable wise." Yay for ignorance. Yay for Ludditism is essentially what this is. Know-nothingism, perhaps. It is a celebration very much antithetical to the prevailing spirit of the Enlightenment, which is catching fire across Europe, and the Restoration era in England is perhaps cautious about that because you are exciting an awful lot of reform, an awful lot of intellectuals, and a kind of meritocracy in its way, where people are questioning things, where people are questioning, how things are done and who is doing them, and all of these concerns are radical. And so the people in charge are getting anxious. And as a somewhat knee-jerk polemicist and heartfelt Tory, Tate is pushing back against that, and of course he heralds the Adam and Eve story and the idea that, well, they went looking for knowledge and look what happened to them, and we're still cursed because of them. And okay, that's gotten an awful lot of mileage over the years as a fairly spurious argument, but what are you going to do? And the idea that there is something to celebrate in ignorance itself, in just I don't know nothing. I don't know what Furioso, the character in literature, did. He doesn't know literature. He doesn't know Rome's triumphs. He doesn't know history. He is suspicious of all of this and wondering, what do you really need that for? Which is a kind of a rough thing to do. And you have to imagine he is also taking a bit of a shot at everybody who is pushing up at the king from underneath and trying to defend the royal court. He doesn't always have great respect in his work for the courtiers of the royal court, but he is generally respectful of the institution. He is by nature a conservative. And so he is advocating in this, presumably for everybody else, just ignorance, just don't know nothing, to preserve the status quo, to preserve the entrenched powers, to prop up hierarchies around the world, which is those institutions, those hierarchies, those entrenched powers were under some attack throughout the Enlightenment, and in those early days, while the king was still settling in or the monarchy was still settling in after the Civil War period, they were a little bit concerned. England needed to calm down a little and didn't want to ruffle any feathers, and that is a prevailing sentiment of Restoration comedy. Let's not get too excited. Let's just, all stay in our lanes, and let's not get too anxious about criticizing the monarchy that we've only just gotten back and put the ugly Civil War behind us. Maybe he's pushing back a little too hard on this, though. Maybe it can be read today. I don't doubt his sincerity in this because of the rest of his work, but I do wonder if reading it today, we can see that as a kind of somewhat hysterical overreach, like some of the more conservative Luddite forces around in the modern day, who are absolutely hysterical to push back against social progressivism, and perhaps in doing so make themselves out to be comic figures and actually do damage to their own cause. That's a modern reading, but it's one that is, I think, significant enough to keep us reading Nahum Tate and saying, well, all right, what's he really got?